How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Ed.
No, it's fantastic. I tell you, the last presentation, I mean, your presentation is about if we are ready for the future, of AI and what it brings. The previous presentation was in Spanish. I don't know how many, if you get a chance to see it, but he was talking about using AI to develop proteins and how quickly the technology has accelerated the process. That in the past, it used to take 3 years and then, to do the investigation, and that will bring, your PhD to do certain aspect of this, this area. And now with AI, you can do the same thing in milliseconds or in nanoseconds. And again, talking about COVID, talking about, the proteins, how you can, do modeling and do predictions. And you can do that at a speed that is amazing. So I'm like, we're in the future already. It's it's incredible. This morning we had Eli Dow, one of our colleagues here at Deloitte, also talking about the use of AI for new form of encryption to guarantee privacy. It's unreal.
Yeah.
This 2 days have just been like, oh, I mean, AI is no longer just future. It's here. What else are we going to expect? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. In fact, I am excited to talk to you a little bit about where we are seeing this heading. And, you covered my introduction on how AI is already here. But, Ed, in the future, even though I'm speaking in English, AI would live stream it in Spanish, depending on, who is listening from where and what their language choice is. But unfortunately, today you'll have to listen to me in English.
No, that's fine. We haven't had that problem. We had a few English-speaking persons. So tell us about yourself, Beena. You work at Deloitte. What do you do at Deloitte?
Yeah, before we start. I lead our global Deloitte AI Institute, and Deloitte AI Institute is our premier gathering place to connect all the dots across the different dimensions of the AI ecosystem, right? Yeah. In the AI ecosystem, there are startups, there are mature AI products, there are policymakers, there is, conversations around ethics and research that's happening. So, how do you use AI in the real world? To be successful at it, you need to be plugged into this entire ecosystem. And Deloitte AI Institute brings that entire ecosystem from an enterprise lens. So, if there is some research happening, whether it's in, the next wave of reinforcement learning, it'll be on how is that relevant for consumer industries and how is that relevant for banks. So Deloitte AI Institute is that place to go and learn more about how AI is being applied in the real world by some of the largest companies. I also lead our AI ethics offering, and that is really our focus around building trustworthy AI, right? There is a lot of value that AI brings to the world today, but there's also some inherent risks associated with it, especially around bias and fairness, reliability, transparency. So it's our holistic approach on not only identifying the ethics part of it, but also how do you actually solve for it in the real world? Because ethics means different things for different companies, but there is a way to actually solve for it and operationalize it at scale. So those are the two big roles I play at Deloitte, Ed.
Great. No, and I know that you're extremely active. Just yesterday, there was a Deloitte-led AI in finance, correct, event.
Yes.
And you lead a lot of those activities.
Yes, that's in my hat with Deloitte AI Institute, which is really putting out this connection points into what are finance companies doing with AI. We've done around life sciences and healthcare. So sharing more, the more we can share, the more we can get companies getting started on their AI journey, the more we can get those best practices out into the world.
Perfect. So let me share the screen. So I have your presentation here. And let me see where it is. And okay. Do you see my screen? Can you see it?
It's
no, I know you can.
Here.
Let me see.
It's not open.
It's not open? Okay, 1 second. Then I'll start the share here. Hold on 1 second.
Maybe on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay, so now I want to share. Okay, now I think we can see it.
Yeah, can you go into presentation mode, please?
Yes. There we go.
Awesome.
Okay.
And I think, I think we can actually jump into, skip the first slide. The first slide is really talking about how we already live in a smart world today, right? AI is everywhere. You've heard it from your prior sessions, but I wanted to give you a view into, what does the future look like, right? Okay. So if you go to the next slide, Ed. Gartner recently stated that AI augmentation will create $2.9 million of business value by 2021. And from here to 2024, we will reach 4.7 trillion value. So that's a big jump, and that also shows the acceleration we're hitting. And in the next 10 years, we can expect that access to infrastructure, speed of computing will allow organizations to scale AI like never before. Massive data sets in a variety of mediums. You've all heard about IoT and sensor getting plugged in everywhere. That will generate a very connected world, and in the end, a more connected consumer. Sophisticated AI technologies that will be combined to bring innovative solutions to organizations and their customers. But what will this really look like? What is the value that can be created over the next 10 years in a tangible business sense? And I wanted to share a few examples across different industries, but just sharing 6 dimensions of what that value could look like. If you can go to the next slide, Ed. So these are the 6 dimensions we think are going to be the 6 levers that will drive the acceleration and also enable businesses to get value from AI. The first one is speed to execution. So businesses are constantly looking for ways to apply AI to accelerate operational and business activities, resulting in minimum latency throughout their organization. So how can they execute faster and better with AI? That is an area we will think AI will help businesses with. The second one is no surprise because we've heard a lot about it in the news, and there's a lot of discussion around this, is around really cost reduction, right? How can you use AI and automation to actually drive cost reductions while the businesses are still growing and accelerating? They can do this by intelligently automating business processes, tedious tasks, and interactions to reduce the cost while increasing efficiency and ensuring the predictability across their front office and back office. The third one is really around reducing complexity, right? Where we are seeing companies are leveraging AI to improve their understanding of their own customers, their products, and enhancing those decision-making capabilities by looking at patterns, connecting the dots, and predicting outcomes from a diverse source of data, right? Not just the data that is explicitly given, but also being able to drive additional data sources. The AI itself is also helping to reduce the complexities that exist within the company. The fourth one is again something I'm sure we've all used in our lives, but we will continue to see it going to that next level, which is really around transformed engagement. AI will figure out new ways to engage customers, suppliers, vendors, and even their own employees, right? We talk a lot about digital engagement, and the heart of digital engagement is cloud-enabled and AI-powered. You can only transform how you're engaging your customers if you study the data that tells you what they want, what they need, and how they want to interact it with your organization and your products. So we're going to see more and more of that engagement evolving from chatbots to even more smarter ways to engage. The fifth one is around fueled innovation. Using that data, we are able to fix existing processes, reduce the complexities, but it's also going to help draw on ideas on new products and services that could be offered in the marketplace by the business, both as an offensive and defensive strategy, generating deep insights on where to play, how to win. We're going to see new business models evolving, new products, market opportunities that come, that's driven by AI. The last one is around fortified trust. And this is not just about thinking about cyber for protection, right? But marrying it with AI so you can sense and scout threats to be proactive, to prevent cyber episodes before they happen, effectively creating more trust with the clients and all the other stakeholders that a company typically engages with. So AI can actually enable businesses to achieve value across all these 6 different dimensions that you're seeing here. Next slide. This one is, we looked at, the question on everyone's mind is, how is the market tracking this transformation? Are organizations and society really transforming? So every year for the last 4 years, Deloitte AI Institute has conducted our State of AI study, which engages 10 countries and over 300 organizations, speaking to over 2,000 executives across the world. And what we saw was 2/3 of the executives that were engaged in this research categorically said that AI gives them a competitive edge today. And this was substantiated by the fact that over 50% have increased their capital budget for AI initiatives by 4 times more than last year. So that you can see how that jump and acceleration is happening because there's more investment that companies and executives are putting behind AI. And 3/4 of these organizations are integrating AI into every enterprise application that they take on. AI is considered the foundational aspect. And also 3/4 of the C-suite say they absolutely agree that AI will transform their organization and their business. So these are some big numbers here, some big, leaders and companies betting on AI. And that's why you're seeing more investment coming in, resulting in more attraction for AI within businesses. So organizations are viewing AI as a transformative play embedded in business thinking, business processes, strategy. And these organizations are creating the capital spend to transform their businesses today so that they are better prepared for tomorrow. So I wanted to give you a few examples of, tangible examples of how AI is impacting companies. If you go to the next slide, this is really a quick view of, where we're seeing some of the impacts of AI in a very tangible way. For example, food companies are adding AI to their recipes. Entertainment companies are using AI to predict a movie's success. Oil and gas companies and other industrial companies are turning to AI to optimize their value chain and reducing cost. And I know I have worked on this in my prior life, but AI is using airlines to run their operations smoothly and predict engine failures and flight delays more proactively. So these are just a few examples of what we are seeing today, which is continuing to evolve. But now let me give you a little bit flavor of even going to that next extreme, right? Next slide. So as I mentioned previously, Gartner is predicting AI augmentation will reach $4.7 trillion in value by 2024. But where and how? In order to be successful today, organizations really need to imagine what tomorrow will look like. And tomorrow, AI will be everywhere. Imagine a call center agent that knows why you're calling before you call, right? And I know, it sounds a bit creepy, but it's happening to some extent even today. Imagine a full supply chain process that manages and adjusts on its own. And think about cosmetics created and customized just for you and your skin alone. And then there's the AI boardroom, interpreting data, predicting and proposing ideas for the organization's future strategy. And I just spoke about this at the beginning of my session, is that think of just this event, this session itself in the future. I could be talking in English, but all of you could be hearing it live in the language of your choice. And these are all possible, and they might sound a bit futuristic today, but with the pace of change we're seeing in the market and with the level of investment that's going in, these and many more will soon be a reality and no longer an imagination. It will be the intelligent future that we are marching towards. Ed, that's all I had, but happy to answer any questions from you or your audience.
Oh, okay. No, so yeah, so let's talk, because a lot of the conversations that we've been having have been about AI. And truthfully, thinking back, it's a lot about predictive. Using AI technology for predicting what's coming up next. That's kind of strange how, if we can predict the future, it kind of, it's still like science fiction sounding, but based on what we're understanding, it's all based on facts, right? It's the more data that you have, the more data points that you have that you can analyze, the better you can say, probability of this happening is greater than this happening based on historical fact, correct?
Absolutely, Ed. You're absolutely right. But, I do want to level set, even though, there's a lot that AI can do and will continue to do, there is a lot it cannot do, right? I think the human dependency and, we talk about we are entering the age of humans with machines, right? It's always around the human factor that is not going anywhere, because you just have to look at the past 18 months or so. I don't think AI could have predicted it. And also the data that's generated in the last 18 months is really not in line with, where it was before, right? So there's still a lot of work to be done in AI. I think what we have to keep in mind is, even though AI is still learning and it's still growing, there are these narrow use cases that AI can solve right now and in the next 10 years, but they are nowhere in the realm of taking over the world, right?
Yeah.
It is more of making our lives easier, making those processes less complicated, automating tasks that don't need much of human brain power. So it's not as futuristic as the robots taking over the world. It's more about how do you team up with humans and make human lives better.
And that was the point that was made by Dr. Bray yesterday in the last conversation that we had, that it's humans are always going to be there. We have to be there. We can't let AI make the final decisions. And you just said it. That's why I started thinking 2020, yes, AI could not have predicted that. And so all the data that has been created, what do you think is going to happen to that data? Is it going to be useful moving forward? Is it going to be combined with what was there before and then make this, make future? How's that data going to be used? And that's a decision that a human has to make, correct?
Yes, and also the reality is that it's not yet over, right? We are still dealing with the pandemic. It's not we are not past it. So it's not a past event. We are still living in the current event, and depending on how quickly we come out of this and go back to that normalcy that we called like prior to 2020. Right, that is a lot of it is going to depend on how long it takes us and what that new normal would look like. I don't think we are ever going to go back to the way things operated in 2019 completely. Right, we are seeing more and more companies moving into the hybrid work model, and being able to track vaccination and contact tracing. Those are all new things, but it helps us be prepared for an event like this in the future, God forbid, if it ever happens, right? So I think that data is absolutely valuable, but it's also in the realm of the context of it, right? Like if you're predicting the failure of a factory floor machine, I don't think there was an impact per se. If you're looking at consumer behavior and retail, yes, that data will, has to be thought about. How do we use that, right? And consumer behavior is going to be very different coming out of this versus how it was in 2019. So I think it again depends on the industry, the context of the use of AI, and it's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely, because that's the whole thing, right? AI is not the same. It's not one AI. It's AI based on industry. I mean, and this is what I've been learning in the past 2 days. You have AI for government, and in fact, we're going to have someone from the Colombian government coming up next to talk about how he is advising the president of Colombia on the proper use of AI, right, for the betterment of the citizens, which is one of the statements that you had there in one of your slides, right? But yeah, one AI doesn't fit all, and because of many things. What's important for one industry is not important for the other one, and on top of that, we have the cultural component. What's important to us in the U.S. is not the same as in China, for example.
Yeah, I'll also add that even within an industry, I think AI has to be even more nuanced. It's not even at the industry level. It is at the use case level, right? Think of healthcare as an industry broadly, right? And even within that, if you go down to that hospital level, right? When AI is being used to optimize the hospital bed management system, that's a different use case and different scenario than when AI is used for patient diagnosis versus a different scenario when AI is being used to optimize the staff schedule or to optimize supply chain. So each one of these are more nuanced, and it's not even at the industry level. It is much below at the use case level, right? Each one of those, the way the algorithm may be the same and just trained on different data sets, but the way it is being applied and the way it needs to be thought through is very different depending on the use case.
In the studies that you're doing with Deloitte, with the yearly one, which industry have you seen that has been better poised to take advantage of AI?
Yeah, it is industries that have been, data heavy legacy wise, right? So if you look at, I classify it at a high level in two categories. One is the industries that have just been created or have existed only in the last 30 years or so, right? The social media companies, the big tech, that's the newer industries. But then if you look at before 30 years, right, that's where the newer companies are very well poised, and they've been created in the internet era, so it's much easier. But the companies that have existed 30 years or before, those companies, in there we see the financial services companies are the most poised because they have traditionally been very data heavy.
Financial or fintech?
Financial.
Really? Okay. Interesting.
Because they've always had, data capture has been a big part of their business.
Okay.
And you also see that in if you go to healthcare, specifically in drug discovery, those have been data heavy. But in companies that have not been traditionally good at capturing data, they have always struggled with, being able to progress with AI.
Do you see the adoption of AI lagging? As usual, we have first world, second world, third world. Have you seen the acceptance of AI or the usage of AI following that? First we do it in first world and then we get later, or is it like opening up to everyone and everyone gets to use it at the same time?
I think AI is definitely opening up, and it is breaking down those geographic barriers. And I don't know how much of it is AI versus the internet, right?
Okay.
Like if you have access to that, and if you have a smartphone, you're pretty much, using AI, whether you know it or not, right? So I think it is not so much about AI, it is about access to, digital technology and access to a strong network. So it's not so much AI, it is more 5G and internet.
That was going to be my next question. So you think that 5G, it's an accelerant type of thing for AI?
It is for, all digital technologies, right? 5G is like the foundational aspect to be able to have that connectivity and be able to, whether it's AI or quantum or blockchain, I think connectivity at the end of the day is what drives the digital equity.
Okay. Yesterday, and I keep saying this, yesterday we had a couple of scientists from Spain, and they were focused on the fashion industry. And I have to tell you, I didn't know how much they're heavily using AI in the fashion industry. And they went through an example of how they're using it. And they're talking about a lot of it focused on image, looking at an image and getting information from that. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
A lot of industries are, they're using all of this technology, and the advancements have just been great, and stuff that we take for granted. I mean, we don't even know we're using AI.
That's true.
Is that the same thing for, let's say, for, in all facets of our life? I mean, are we using AI? Where do you see for personal, for us, where do you see that we're taking more advantage of AI, the individual?
Definitely, with our phones, right? A lot of things have been automated, whether it is, driving directions and traffic patterns. When you use any app, it is pretty much powered by AI. So I think anything you can do with the phone is AI driven. And there is a podcast that I do called AI Ignition for the Deloitte AI Institute. And this is one of the favorite questions that I've asked all the thought leaders who've come on that. And we think anything that needs like a high human physical touch, like if you are going for a haircut or if you're going for a massage, right? That those are still, but still need that human touch. AI might automate some of it, like it can recommend some kind of haircut for you based on your face profile,
on your
facial
features.
features. it might recommend, but I don't think we're at that point where we can trust AI to do the actual haircut, right? So we see more and more where even the regular roles are getting supported by AI.
It's funny, yesterday during one of the conversations, and you mentioned about that stuff, they were talking about AI process controls, right? Where you can do, AI is being developed where the steps are almost the same, almost repetitive, and so forth. And I started thinking factories, and they started talking about surgeons, doctors, right? That they do the same thing and the same steps and everything is the same, that you have robots already looking at it, getting the information, capture and learning, and that then they can take over. That it's, I don't know how I would feel about that, having if we don't feel that we're ready to have robots do a haircut, how do we feel about robots doing surgery? But it seems like it's happening.
Yeah, it is, and it's more of the the less complicated ones. Like, would you trust a robot? A robot is not going to get tired or fatigued, right?
Right. Exactly.
So it's a balance between vanity, how you look, versus versus be getting getting a machine supervised by a human who might get tired, might get fatigued, but can do the precision work at a level that is actually helping the human surgeon to do it better and faster.
Let's talk about ethics. I know that that's something that you, well, part of what you lead at Deloitte. The previous presentation, they were showing an example, for bias, right? Where they teach the computer a whole bunch of words that you put together. I think it's the GPT-3 algorithm, I think that's what it's called. And they teach the computers a whole bunch of the words, and then they mask some computers and had the computers do the auto complete, right? And so the example that he gave was the doctor asked the nurse to do something. And then the answer was he, and then left the computer auto filled in. And because he said he, it assumed that it was the doctor speaking. And when they used the word she, it assumed it was the nurse speaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, I mean, what is going to happen to that? I mean, that has to be fixed, because it's not only, gender. I mean, it affects everything. So how is that? What are the advances being done in that area?
There's a lot happening, and I think part of the challenge is the example that you gave. If you stick to that, right? If you look at historical data, it is more men have been doctors than women in the past century, right?
Okay.
So, when we are feeding AI a certain data set and expecting it to mimic human behavior, it is learning from historical data and continuing the biases that have been propagated for decades before you and I even got to it, right? So I think part of it is addressing the historical data. Part of it is addressing the human biases, right? This is an example of where, it in a way, AI is reflecting the real world. It's reflecting our own biases as humans. So I think we have to look deeply within ourselves and say, there is a gender problem there. And how are we going to fix that problem? In a way, AI is making us aware of the real world and the biases that exist, right? So that's a deeper Beena point of view. And but I think like AI is still a technology that is evolving and growing, right? As these problems come up, we need to be able to address it, fix it, or remove that AI solution till it is fixed, right? You can roll back. I think the example that you gave is very relatable, but it's also rooted in deep human biases and the challenges we've had as humanity and mankind, till now, right? So AI is highlighting those. So, I think we have an opportunity to go fix that core challenge, core problem. And then, we need to show AI a future where that bias does not exist, right?
Right.
So there are a number of ways it's being addressed. It can be addressed through, whether it's through synthetic data or data creation, that shows more of that, unbiased data point of view. So I think the first step, Ed, is to be aware of, the kind of biases that creep in. And as soon as you have that awareness, to then put in the guardrails to make sure those don't get propagated further.
Okay. In the pharmaceutical industry, I know that you spoke. One of your conversations that I watched was with the director of a big pharmaceutical company. How is pharma? Because now we're in this, we depend on them basically. How are they using AI to advance for the betterment of, for our life, whatever?
Yeah, and you just said, one of the prior speakers also shared, right? I think
Right.
there's a lot that's being done around to speed up drug research and discovery,
Right.
and being able to address some of the health challenges proactively. That's definitely something we also see. When we talk about any industry, it's not just about the core business, but also looking at the foundational aspects of what runs that business, right? Whether it's a finance team or the supply chain team, there is so much opportunity to optimize at every level, which all adds up to the core business value of that organization's purpose, right? So I think what we're seeing is AI usually starts within the IT department, right? And is more back office, but now it has gone more on going to the core business value of that organization. And we're seeing it in the pharma industry as well.
Okay. Regulatory compliance and stuff like that. That's a big thing. I mean, we've seen, I'm involved in cybersecurity, so we know the whole thing about privacy, about security, regulation, and everything. AI is the government, and in this case, the US government, are they focusing, doing anything to do with regulatory for AI specific industry?
Oh yeah, there are a number of agencies and experts working together to figure out the regulation. I like the approach that we're taking, which is more thoughtful. Instead of banning a technology completely, right? Looking at, coming up with the guidelines and regulations around specific use cases, right? Like if you're using a technology for, like I said, example, right? Even within a hospital system, the regulations for when AI is being used for hospital bed management versus patient care, it has to be and will be very different, right? So what I'm seeing is the kind of thoughtfulness that's going in to come up with these regulations instead of just making blanket, guidelines or regulations. So there is a lot of activity going on right now that makes me very hopeful that we will see regulations, thoughtful regulations coming out by industry, by use case soon.
Okay. In your, when you speak to multiple leaders worldwide, do they share a common goal in their vision for AI? Or is it specific for their organization? Or
Yes. Can you repeat that question?
yeah,
I'm not sure I understood.
Yeah, so is there like a common shared vision of where AI, or how they want to see AI be implemented and be put to use? Not just from leaders in the States, but leaders in Europe, leaders in Asia, do
Yeah.
they share a common vision for that?
There are a number of efforts and working groups that's coming together and build that out. But I would say it's still a work in progress. And it's not only at a geographic level or a country level or regional level, you also need to bring in experts from a technical background, from a regulatory background, from a research background. All these different background, the domain experts need to come in to shape this. So I think that's part of the challenge of coming up with that one vision for AI.
Okay.
It's not an easy problem to solve.
Yeah, no, it's not exactly, because again, we go back to the human nature, right? The culture and so forth. For future generations, one of the conversations that we had yesterday was very interesting. That we have the generations right now very good at using technology, but they not good at knowing how that technology works. And again, the question that Dr. Bray said to me is like, do you know how to fix a car engine if it breaks? Like, no, we know how to use it, but we don't know how to repair it. He said that's one of the things that worries him. In the future generations, they know how to use the technology. They're very adept at using AI, but how do we bridge that gap right now to begin building those future scientists? Because AI, from my 2 days of listening here, I mean, mostly everyone is a PhD, data scientist, mathematician. How are we doing that? How is the AI community focusing that with the current generation?
So Ed, that's a great question. And, I think it's on top of mind for a lot of AI leaders. And I actually have a nonprofit that I started 4 years ago called Humans for AI.
Oh, okay.
That is focused on getting all humans to be part of the AI journey, right? Irrespective of whether you're just a user and consumer versus you are a data scientist, right? I think basic AI literacy is a must for everybody. They don't need to be able to write the algorithms, but they need to know all the pros and cons of that algorithm, right? They need to understand what machine learning means, what deep learning means. So we definitely, the Humans for AI is an organization that's focused on driving that basic literacy, AI literacy across the globe.
Across the globe. Okay, so in Latin America, you see them. Is this organization getting a lot of traction in this region?
Absolutely. It's getting because it is, like you said, AI seems like this very complex topic for mathematicians and scientists. But honestly, it is also very relatable because you're using it in your day-to-day life. So it is being able to understand the basic definitions of some of the terminologies that you use associated with AI. In a way, it is necessary to remove the fear and drive the adoption. But even more important, it is so that you can be part of the AI conversation. If you don't understand what machine learning means or what deep learning means, what does that mean at a fundamental level, it's very hard for a person to be involved in that discussion. So I think basic AI literacy is something that is crucial. And and it's something that we are working on really hard.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, as a professional, we've encountered people that they said, or company that they said they have a, we know about machine learning and AI, and then they go and they tell you something that is not. We're like, no, that's not machine learning. So that's a big issue. And again, we're talking at a professional level. We're not even talking at a, at a teenager or younger type of level. So it's very interesting.
It is. I mean, I would love to get, your audience engaged in partnering with Humans for AI and see.
What's the website so I can put it up here?
Yes, it's humansforai.org, also .com. Humans for
Humans
AI.
for AI. Yeah, okay. I just shared it there with the attendees on the virtual platform. No, this is great. From a Deloitte perspective, what do you, I mean, again, we had Eli Dow, a tech fellow that came from IBM. We have you leading the AI Institute. I know we have a big organization within Deloitte that's focused on AI. I see other consulting firms also making a lot of investments on AI. What is next for Deloitte and AI? Where do you see our organization going there?
Yeah, we are pretty much at the forefront with AI. With we are not only doing it for our clients and customers, but we are also looking at how do we ourselves use AI more effectively within our organization. We are not looking at it just from a value creation perspective. We are looking at it also from a risk and governance perspective. We are looking at the fuzzy areas around ethics and saying, how do we solve for it? We are looking at the side effects of AI and thinking about, future of work and upskilling our own workforce, but also helping our clients upskill. So we look at AI very holistically and across all the different dimensions to solve for not only the value creation of AI and all the possible effects of AI and how do you mitigate for those.
Okay, so perfect. Beena, thank you so much for your time. I know you're an extremely busy woman, so thank you for taking time to being part of this event. And tell you what, that information that you provided has been really good. Humansforai.org. Please, help us, because that's how we're going to get, move forward, correct? Everyone chips in and we all participate.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you so much for the audience for listening in. Take care.
Right, thank you. Bye-bye. Bueno, ahí tuvimos a Beena Ammanath de